Alright guys, so today I'd like to talk about the ArenaNet live stream event that we got for the Living World Season 5. I had originally intended to get videos out faster on this, but Windows decided to update and I couldn't get into my editing software to make any videos, but I got that problem resolved and we're gonna go ahead and take a look at this event. On the whole, I feel like this was a very poorly received event, and maybe not for the right reasons, but at the end of the day, that seems to be the general community consensus on this whole live event ordeal. Still, let's see exactly what was said and how the presentation went down so we can form our own opinions, especially if you haven't yet seen the live event for yourself. Leading into this event, we had a live stream countdown giving us some clues as to what we might be able to expect from both the event and Season 5, and I think this is a great way to build hype. It's just that the information that was given wasn't really on the same level as the hype that they ended up building. Once the event started off, Mike Z came out to tell us some interesting things about the future of the business model.
When you purchase Path of Fire, starting in about 15 minutes, Heart of Thorns, our first expansion, will be included for free. For those of you who have already purchased Heart of Thorns and have enjoyed countless hours in the Maguma, we want to show you our appreciation for your loyalty. And with that, we're going to release the support through an exclusive Heart of Thorns Veterans Pack. This Veterans Pack includes a Mordrum-themed glider, a new title Vanguard, both of which can only be obtained through this, and a voucher for one of 16 possible Gem Store armor piece skins. For players who already own Path of Fire, but not Heart of Thorns, later this week you will receive the expansion added free to your account. All of this will start being rolled out early next week.
So it seemed that moving forward, Heart of Thorns will be bundled with Path of Fire. If you already own Heart of Thorns, you'll be given a player appreciation package, and if you only own Path of Fire, you will retroactively have Heart of Thorns added to your account. And based on some of the information we see later on in this event, it makes more than enough sense that they would want as many players as possible to own this expansion. We did also see an in-game preview of build templates, but the UI is completely turned off, so all we could do is speculate as to how far along development is for this new system that a lot of players have really been waiting on. After Mike Z left the stage, two of the narrative team leads came out to tell us a little bit about the direction of the story, which does appear to center around Char and Norn.
And we really wanted to get back to what makes the game great, which is the player races. And we haven't given as much love to the Char and the Norn as we've given to the others. The Sylvari had Heart of Thorns, and the humans kind of took center stage in Alona. So the Shiver Peaks really seemed to us the perfect setting to tell a different type of dragon story centered around the Char and the Norn. We're kind of wondering, what's the new status quo now that 3 of the Elder Dragons are gone, 2 are asleep, and we don't know what's going on with the 3rd one. They aren't what we thought they were, and we're starting to wonder, and it turns out Dormag is wondering what the new status quo is, too.
So I definitely agree with these developers in that all the storylines so far have been kind of focusing on one race, and certain races have kind of been left in the dust, so it'll be nice to return to, say, a Char or Norn storyline. Specifically, it looks like Ritlock and Bram are going to be the characters we'll be focusing on the most, but that doesn't mean that we won't see more things, like some more interesting things for the Norn.
The other things that we want to look at in the Shiver Peaks region are the spirits of the wild. The Norn follow these spirit guides. You can choose, if you play a Norn, between Snow Leopard, Bear,
Wolf,
Raven, and Wolf. But we also have some ones that went missing. That when the Norn fled south, they stayed behind to kind of fend Dormag off. So that's Owl, Wolverine, Ox, Eagle, and we're going to let you guys know what happened to them this season, too.
And it also seems like Ritlock is a dad, so we're going to deal with his family life and his kids. They do go on to give some more detail about the direction of the story moving forward, but I'm only sort of interested in that, so if you want to check that out for yourself, the live event is available to rewatch at your leisure. But before the narrative team left the stage, they also did shine a little bit of light on the structure of Season 5, or Saga 5, Saga 1, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, all right, it is a saga, but that doesn't mean that you can still expect the awesome episodic content that you're used to. The difference is we've now got 4 content teams, and so that kind of gives us a little bit of leeway on what a release is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's going to be a story-focused episode, but it could also mean on expanding existing content or focusing on another element of the game or trying a new type of content that we've never tried before. So we also have some surprises we want to slide in. And I think the design team is going to speak to some of that too in a few minutes here.
It's bigger than a season, it's a saga.
So they are saying that they have 4 fully staffed content teams, and this echoes back to the What's Next for Guild Wars 2 blog post we got a while back. It doesn't seem like the 4 fully staffed teams are specifically developing story stuff like we're used to for the Living World, and some of those teams might branch off to work on some other projects, but they didn't really give us a whole lot of information. The biggest takeaway here is that with a saga, it would appear that any given episode could be a story-driven episode like we're used to, but it could also be changes to an older map, older content, or something new altogether, and then they tell us that they'd like to squeeze in some surprises as well. And in a lot of ways, this is what the community's been asking for, is a less of a focus on Guild Wars 2's story narrative specifically, and more of just general updates to the game. It's just unfortunate that we didn't get more examples of what to expect here, because without that, this sort of is just non-information. If anything, I left this portion of the show with even more questions than I had when we went into the live event. After the narrative team, the gameplay team came out and told us a little bit about the maps, features, and honestly gave us probably the biggest insight into what Season 5 or Saga 5, again, I don't know what to call it at this point, but what that will be like.
So we're going to be starting off with the prologue episode, which is called Bound by Blood. That is going to be set in the location that is often requested by fans, which is the Char homelands, called Grothmar Valley. But then from there, with episode 1 and episode 2, we're going to the far Shiver Peaks, and that is the furthest north we've ever been in GW2. So then from there, we're going to go into some masteries. Z had alluded before that we will be taking existing masteries and bringing them into future content. So expect things, like gliding, jumping mushrooms, updrafts, right? But we're also continuing our horizontal progression philosophy by introducing a new mastery line, starting with episode 1. That mastery line will actually evolve and grow into episode 2. And if you're wondering what that is, it is actually going to be exploring the history of the Norn deities called the Spirits of the Wild. And for episode 1, the first spirit is going to be the Raven Spirit. And you'll be able to harness the power of the Raven Spirit to unlock its cryptic secrets and all of its different powers.
So it appears that the prologue is going to deal with the Char, and the next 2 episodes will deal with the far Shiver Peaks. They speak briefly about the mastery system, and they don't say anything about mounts at all, and rather it seems like we're going to get some masteries dealing with the spirits of the wild, and those will give us some abilities, but they didn't really talk about those abilities or what we'll use them for in the maps. That said, they did add a few mounts randomly in Season 4, so if you were hoping for more mounts, that doesn't mean that we won't get them for sure, just maybe be a little guarded with those expectations going forward. They speak a bit more about the prologue instance, and it looks like we're going to get some sort of Char party.
So with the prologue, we are, as everyone said multiple times, we're going to Grothmar Valley, but back in Season 4, we killed the Elder Dragon Kralkatorrik. And so all the Char warbands are grouping up to come together in a peaceful, big-ass party. So there's going to be rock concerts, there's derby racing, Coliseum battles, ceremonial burning of the Flame Legion effigies.
Yeah!
I mean, look at this.
This is where I want to go. This is where I want to party.
I know.
So to me, the prologue episode sounds a lot like a Guild Wars 2 festival, but it probably won't be reoccurring. We'll just be headed to the Char homelands to see all of the Char warbands come together and sort of talk about the way the world is today. As far as this whole rock concert thing, I'm not a huge fan of this. To be completely honest with you guys, I really don't want to see electric guitars in my fantasy game, but I guess that's just something I'll have to live with.
Going into episode 1 and 2 that Clayton and I are working on, we're trying out some new stuff. And so episode 1 and 2 have a deeply intertwined story. And it's also going to be a tone difference from the prologue, because there's a pretty heavy inspiration from Lovecraftian horror. But yeah, so there's going to be a dynamic growth of the map between episode 1 and 2. The new areas, new stories, new achievements, new events, mastery unlocks. all that across the 2 episodes. And we're really looking forward to this different dynamic approach.
So it looks like we're getting a more Season 2 approach to certain maps being added to the game. This just meaning that the map will start off at a certain size and expand between episodes 1 and 2. It also seems like some of the story will be intertwined, which makes sense since it'll all be taking place on the same map, just in different locations. The Guild Wars 2 storyline has gotten a little depressing at times, but it certainly hasn't gone full-on dark. And it does seem like they're trying to, at least for these first 2 episodes, shift the tone of the storyline in a way that I would probably like more than a lot of the story we've gotten recently. Still, I don't know why they're saying that they're trying something new. This is something that maybe this team is trying for the first time, but again, in Season 2, we saw the map expand over some episodes, and so that's nothing really all that innovative or crazy. And then they go on to say the same things that we get in every single Living World release. New masteries, new achievements, new events, and that's basically what we've grown to expect from the Living World anyway.
But we're excited to announce a new feature that will answer that question in the form of strike missions. And so what strike missions are going to allow players to group up to 10 people and take on challenging boss encounters. It's going to be introductory into raid content, but without a lot of the stress.
Oh, nice.
Right? We heard all you, it can be intimidating sometimes to like get into that twitchy type of content, the high choreographed content, and so we want to introduce something that is going to be that stepping stone into something
I
like
assume
that,
more
right?
digestible too. Like raids are
Absolutely.
great, right? But there's such a time commitment.
They're extreme time commit. Sometimes it's really hard to even get a bunch of friends together,
Sure.
right? Different time zones, like all different types of stuff like that. So we're introducing a public mode with this, which will allow you to group up to people in the map looking for the same boss that you're trying to take out, right? So we're really excited about that. And let's see, with Prologue, we're actually introducing the first one, which is this Icebrood construct.
This
Yeah,
guy?
he's right behind me, super scary. But what's interesting about this guy is he's going to evolve from the Prologue to Episode 1. So not only in his model, but also in his game mechanics as well.
So next they move into something that I'm the most interested in, which is this strike mission concept. It does appear to be an open world version of easy mode raids to get PvE players interested in raid content. They even refer to this as an introduction to raid content, so that'll be great for players who are a little bit curious about raids but don't really know how to get in there with the 10-person barrier and the kind of meta-focused communities around raiding. Still, none of the live event talked about raids or fractals, so a lot of people think that this is now the form of hard instanced content that we'll be getting moving forward. I don't think they would call it an introduction to raids if it wasn't supposed to be that. Still, I think it would have been nice to have some kind of confirmation that we were at least going to continue getting new raids going forward with Guild Wars 2. It seems the first strike mission, much like many of the other points that they hit on, is going to change over Episode 1 and Episode 2, so that's a little bit of a dynamic growth and change, and it does kind of feel a lot more like the Living World Season 1, only the things that they're adding to the game are going to be more replayable this time. And honestly, as long as strike missions aren't designed to replace raids or fractals or instance content in the game, I think they'll be a welcome addition, especially with what they kind of end on as far as strike missions are concerned.
From a design standpoint, what strike missions allow us to do is to take creatures and bosses that we create in like the story and campaign where most players only play once. Well, we get to take that, we get to tweak that, we get to modify that, put them in these strike missions, and players can play that over and over again, get great rewards for it, right?
So here you can hear them saying that they would like to make parts of the Living World story bosses repeatable. This is another thing that players have been asking for a long time, and I do think that this strike mission approach would be a great replacement for things like world bosses and bounties, though I know I'm probably not speaking on behalf of the whole community when I say that. And of course, they say that with Episode 2, we'll be getting a new world boss, and that'll be different than strike missions, so don't worry, I don't think that's the direction that ArenaNet's trying to take world bosses anyway.
We're also continuing our lineage of world bosses. So starting with Episode 2, we'll introduce another one. GW1, there was this creature underneath this ice. It was like you knew it was your car, but you couldn't really see it, you couldn't interact with it. Well, in GW2, he's going to be the world boss that you get to interact with. The concept art behind me is very early. It's still changing. We're still in the process of taking pieces of what we like and other things and mashing them together. But for Episode 2, players will be able to not only interact with this guy, you'll be able to beat the crap out of him as well.
They did also show us some concept art for something called the Bone Skinner that will be setting traps and chasing us around, and that sounds kind of terrifying and awesome, so I'm looking forward to that. I do kind of hope that this is going to be part of the story and not necessarily some open world thing that 50 plus players will zerg around killing. It doesn't look like a huge world boss type of enemy anyway, so I think it belongs in the story, but I'm not entirely sure. The gameplay team then wrapped things up by talking a little bit about competitive, but it's probably not as much as a lot of players wanted to hear.
So we actually have a new armor set coming soon.
From the back of the room, the one PvP fan, we got him.
Yeah, getting that new armor set. Also, Z mentioned Swiss-style tournaments. Those are coming. I'm pretty excited about those personally. And then we have also mini seasons coming in between conquest seasons. So that's a way, it's an opportunity for us to sort of change up gameplay, different activities, and so on between conquest seasons. And then finally, we have not forgotten about world restructuring. We're actually really excited to talk about that in the coming months.
Finally, we had a representative of NCSoft come out, and based on how he was dressed, I thought for sure that capes were confirmed. Ha 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 ha. Ha. But instead, he came out and he just sort of tried to sell us a bunch of Guild Wars 2 merch, and that was the final 10 or so minutes of the live event. On the whole, ArenaNet delivered on exactly what they said this live event would be about, and probably more so than any of us could have expected, well, should have expected anyway. This was announced as our first look at the Living World Season 5, and we definitely got information about the prologue and the first 2 episodes. Additionally, they talked to us about PvP in World vs. World, which I didn't really know if they were going to say anything about anyway. Yes, it most certainly was a new armor set and mini seasons in between PvP, with the announcement that Swiss tournaments are going to be tested soon, and that World vs. World restructuring is still being worked on. They didn't forget about it, and they look forward to telling us more about it in the coming months. But honestly, I think a lot of players probably, especially when it comes to the World vs. World restructuring, they would have preferred that we just didn't hear anything about it at this point. World vs. World restructuring has been in the works for years now, and it's just not seeming to make the progress that a lot of players were hoping for. Also, a lot of players were hoping to hear that raids would continue to be released in Guild Wars 2. I know as a Fractal player, I wanted to hear that some more work would be going into Fractals, and I know this isn't necessarily something that's tied up with the Living World specifically. A lot of players look at the Living World and they think story, new maps, and that's basically it, but they have made public comments in the past about how things like raids and fractals are part of the Living World. Looking back now on this live event, I think they probably didn't need to have it at all. I do think it's cool that they bothered to have a live event, but when you have an epic countdown and you kind of build this thing up by posting multiple times over a series of weeks that this new event is going to take place, players begin to expect something big. And when you basically just sit everybody down and tell them the same thing that you would normally just tell us in a trailer or a blog post, it just feels like it was unnecessary. And ultimately, guys, that's my feelings on this live event as a whole. I think the information that they gave us is pretty much what we should have expected based on previous releases of the Living World, or now sagas as they're called. But because of things like this countdown leading into a stream and the amount of hype they built around this live event, players rightfully, in my opinion, expected way more than what we ended up getting. I know everyone's a little disappointed with the live event, but if you have anything that you took away from this that I didn't cover here in this video, please let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if you're excited about this new saga system as opposed to the Living World seasons that we've grown so used to. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this or any one of my videos. I hope you have a super swell day, all things considered, and I'll see you in the next one.